This story, the owners of a Nissan car dealership in Manchester are in major trouble this morning after several customers say they were scammed. And now the Federal Trade Commission, along with the Attorney General's office, have filed a lawsuit against them. Channel 3 Eyewitness News reporter Marcy Jones joins us now live outside of Manchester City Nissan to break it all down. So good morning, Marcy. Pretty wild allegations here.
It really is. Good morning, Roger. Deceptive practices and misconduct, two things that Attorney General William Tong says will not be tolerated in the state of Connecticut. As legal proceedings move forward now, he hopes this sends a message to not only the owners of this business, but others in sales. Now, the lawsuit says that customers purchased what they believe to be pre-certified owned vehicles, now which is a used car in exceptional condition where any issues have been recorded and fixed, making the vehicles more trustworthy. And when one is advertised for sales, that is the set price. But according to the lawsuit, that's not what happened in several cases at Manchester City Nissan. Attorneys say a customer would come in for a car, advertise it around $20,000, and wind up paying closer to $23,000. Customers also claim to have found random charges tacked on to the cost of their vehicle without their knowledge or consent. Attorney General William Tong says that he believes the dealership knew exactly what they were doing to deceive customers.
What is really disappointing and shocking to me are the thousands of dollars in fake fees, bogus fees, junk fees, add-ons that Manchester City Nissan has larded onto its customers.
Now, the dealership has not responded to any of Channel 3's attempts to contact them. Tong says that he hopes the owners realize what a big deal this is and will settle any wrongdoings as soon as possible. And if not, he will see them in court. Reporting live in Manchester, Marcy Jones, Channel 3 Eyewitness News.